people who are interested to be able to speak God's word and to be able to know how to help and assist people in terrible times, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. I want you guys to take a deep breath, okay? Ready? Okay, this is going to be a really intense topic. All you guys have social media, so it's not surprising that, hey, you guys are aware that this month is Sexual Abuse Awareness Month, or Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so we're going to talk about that. I'm not scared to talk about these hot topics that our culture is talking about. And not only that, but I want to be able to tell you guys why our faith makes logical things about the standards of what God's standards are in our lives. You know, we're living according to God's standards because through Jesus, we're able to live those. And so we're going to go ahead and discuss on those aspects. So first off, we're going to discuss the image of God. I know we talked about the image of God before. You know, I understand we talked about how God designed us with creativity. God designed us with gifts and talents and all these different things. And so we're going to go ahead and dive in to the purpose of why God designed us. And so we're going to go ahead and go to Genesis 1:16. And it says, I'm going to go down here so I can read it. It says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So you see that God designed us and created us like Him. We're not God, but we have characteristics of Him. God has feelings. God has creativity. God has a unique purpose, just like we have those type of aspects in our lives. And not only that, but we are created with value, honor, and respect. That's the one thing. A lot of people view human beings as just machines. Or, oh, they're just an animal, you know, like they have no feelings. Like, that's how certain people have views about how humans are. But our view of humans is, hey, you guys are valuable, you guys have respect, and you guys need to be treated seriously because we are individuals created by God. And God did not make us just to make us, He made us with a purpose. So let's go ahead and figure out what this purpose is. Genesis 2:24. And this verse states that this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Now, I understand there's different views about this, but I'm just going to speak our perspective of the Bible in this, because logically it makes sense to me. So when it comes to sexuality, you know, we have the beginning of the universe. God created male and female for two purposes: to procreate, you know, make babies, y'all know this, and to become one. That is the difference between what the world view of that is and our view of that. We don't just see sex as just something to do. We see it produce purpose. There's a purpose why two people somehow bond together. And this is why it's really improper if you pursue a dating relationship with that, because if you guys break up, you're gonna get an emotional wreck. And I'm here to say, hey, I'm not perfect. I've gone through that stuff, and it's not good. It messes your mind because there's some type, even in science, there's some type of chemical reaction when that happens. And I'm here to state that, hey, God created that with the context of marriage because we know that in the view of God's marriage is, hey, we're going to do this for the long haul. We're going to do this together. There's no cheating, and there's no all these different things that if we're not committed to God's standard, because we sin, which we're going to talk about sin, we get to fall short in that, and that's what we do not want to do. We don't want to fall short and create circumstances that are the consequences of that. But that is the prime purpose of why God created us different, is for us to create and for us to become one, which is why the scripture states, the real purpose of creation is for man to leave the household and to pursue a wife to become one. And the whole purpose is this. You know, it's out of pure love. We're going to go ahead and go to Ephesians 4:22-25. I'm going to go ahead and read it from here because there's a lot. It says that you were taught with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. So just like coming together, we're one. You know, we all have different characteristics, we all have different functions. When it comes to marriage, when it comes to the context of how God designed that, you know, the husband and wife become one. They go through struggles together. They both have differences and uniquenesses. And they come together to work this thing out because there's pure love out of it. And outside of this view comes distortion. I don't know what you've been taught about sin. You know, sometimes what I've been taught as a youth kid is sin is just, oh, I messed up. But learning now and growing in my faith and studying it, it's more than just that, which is what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss what is sin. What's the difference of sin? Why is this word, why do we believe this? And I'm going to tell you why. In this world in real life, you're going to face with people with different perspectives. There's people who believe good and bad, there's people who don't even believe good and bad. And it's crazy, it's like, okay, so you don't believe anything is moral because you believe this world is an illusion, and there's crazy beliefs like that, which is why I believe the Bible presents a good case, because it's so logical. Because of man's disobedience with God, God is holy and just, and because we disobeyed him back in the garden, Adam and Eve, is when sin entered into the world, which is why we have corruption. We have distortion. Did you know sin is not normal? Back in the beginning, everything was beautiful, everything was great, which is what is being promised in the future when Jesus comes back. We're going to have that promise where there's going to be no more death, no more sickness, no more tears. Because that's not how we were supposed to live, but because that sin entered the world because of disobedience, we all have this tendency to not believe in God, to not obey God, and to not follow him. Which is why we need Jesus in our lives, because he became the perfect sacrifice for our sin. So then it is him living within us to be able to do the right things that we're supposed to do. It's because of God's love that he paid the penalty of our sin, that we deserve punishment. We know we do wrong. We all sin. We all sin all the time. And it's when we allow Jesus to change us and transform our actions to be able to live right and according to God's standard. Because we are designed for desire. And a lot of sin, including sexual sin, is based on desire. We have to desire to do it. We have to desire to meet up with somebody. But with this instance, it's distorted. To me, it's evil. To be able to go to somebody and forcefully do something to them. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about exploitation. And this is how these cases come up. And I'm going to share my story in a little bit about it, because we're going to go through certain things in the Bible about this scenario of being sexual abuse, sexual assault, and even rape. Because it's real, you guys. This is the world we live in. Because if we deny good and bad, then we're just excusing it. And this is why I believe in God's standard, because he clearly states it's wrong. And we all agree, obviously, it's wrong to do that, right? Exploitation means the act of taking advantage of another weakness or using someone meanly or unjustifiably for one's own advantage. Taking advantage of someone when they don't know what they're doing, manipulating them, telling them certain things just so that individual could get their way. And that's not right. That's the consequence when we allow sin in our lives to go deeper and deeper and not turning back. I believe it started with something small, and that person just kept meditating in it and kept absorbing it and kept committing it to the point where it led to somewhere where you should not be at. For example, when it comes to lying and stealing, we all know that when it comes to lying and stealing, those things progress to manipulation. Those things progress towards robbing a bank. Just like last week, we mentioned all these different scenarios that happen in our world today. But that's because people are not dealing with their desires. They're not dealing with their sinful nature that we have. But yes, people take advantage of people. Some biblical examples, we're going to go through a couple of them, because this is real life, you guys. I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. Sexual abuse. 2 Samuel 13, 11 to 12, 14 to 20. It says, "But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, 'Come to bed with me, my sister.' 'No, my brother,' she said to him. 'Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing.' But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. Her brother Absalom said to her, 'Has that Ammon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister, for he is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart.' And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman." Isn't it a shame? We think the Bible is full of rainbows and sunshines. But guess what? It talks about real life and real scenarios and real decisions. This is a sad scenario. Now, in the couple of verses in the story, the family gets God's punishment. God punished them. Because in the Old Testament, there was no grace. There was punishment. You know, God did not tolerate that at all, and he still doesn't tolerate that today. But Tamar, you know, all we know after this verse is that, you know, she just kept it in. And we're going to go through this a little bit. But through this story, later on in the story, they faced, God punished them because God does not tolerate sin. I'm grateful that we live in the grace of God right now, which is why after this, even though we have grace now, we still need to do the right thing to people and report it in all those scenarios because this is serious stuff. We're going to go through another scenario. Now this one isn't as bad, but it's still bad. I don't know if you guys know who Joseph is. He's the person who had dreams that God gave, and he got sent to Egypt because his brothers wanted him dead. There's a scenario of his. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted me to care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, she kept complaining, "Hey, come to bed with me, come to bed with me." He's like, "No, I don't want that." He refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. All right, let's go back. So we see in these scenarios, hey, it happens. It happens all the time. It happens in the Bible, which gives a validation that, hey, it's real. It's real life. We see this in our world today. And so, one thing we gotta do when it comes to calling to action on these scenarios is these different things. So we're gonna go ahead and go through Romans. And I'm giving you the biblical side, and I'm gonna share my story because I've gone through it, which is why I'm credible for this. Because I know the pain, I know the situation, and I know the struggle. Romans 13, 1-2 says, "Obey the government, for God is the one who has put it there. There's no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So those who refuse to obey the law of the land are refusing to obey God, and punishment will follow." You know, the laws of the land, they're here. We need to obey them, you know? Like, they're there for a reason, to be able to provide just, proper judgment. You know, God is judgment, but he has instituted us to decide judgment based on the law. And so this is why it's interesting to make sure we're following the law, because God has instituted the law. So we're going to go ahead and talk about my story. And this is why I'm passionate about this, because I've gone through it. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about my first scenario. This was back in childhood when I was 6 to 7 years old. And at that age, you barely know anything, you know. And it's funny because the first thing we learned about is exploitation, taking advantage. So my friend's cousin, you know, decided to do that. He decided to take advantage and to exploit me by telling me, my 6-year-old self, "Hey, come, let's play a game. Let's go to this house, let's play a game." And me as a 6 to 7-year-old, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, "All right, cool, we're gonna play a game." And it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case at all. And so that was the first attempt that I experienced sexual assault, sexual abuse, and rape. Is that scenario, because I was young and did not know what was going on. Until now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, snap. Like, that happened. And not only that, but I had issues in childhood that I could look back. I'm like, wow, so that was the outcome of what happened at that time. Another one happened to me in sophomore year in high school, which is why I'm talking about this for you guys, because you guys are in high school. And if it happened to me in high school, I bet you your friends probably experienced something similar, because this was an unexpected thing. I was at a sleepover at one of my best friend's house and one of his friends. I was at a sleepover, and, you know, we all stayed in one bed. I was sleeping in the middle, both were sleeping on the sides. You know, it was a sleepover. You know, we sleep in the same bed, you know, expecting to sleep and wake up. So then, during the night, this was around 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there, I noticed his friend was trying to touch me. And my reaction was, what the heck is going on here? So me pretending to sleep, I tried to move my hand out of his hand, trying to attempt to touch me. So I tried that once, he backed off, but then he kept being persistent. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, is he asleep? Is he like daydream? Like not daydream, but sleepwalking? Like what is going on? So he tried it again, try to move my arm aside, pretending I'm asleep to knock it off. And then the third time he did it again, knocked it off again. And here's when I know this was not a game. It's not a game at all. His alarm rang. And once the alarm rang, he came out of the bed, shut his alarm off, came back in the bed, and tried to attempt again. After that, I knew, okay, I need to get out of here because this is really uncomfortable. This is just unexpected. You know, I did not expect that to happen, even though he made excuses, which we're going to discuss. I have evidence to this to prove this up. Yes, we could talk about stories, but hey, victims, certain people don't believe the stories, but I have true evidence of this scenario. So I then decided to pretend I was going to the bathroom, so I yelled heck aloud, I gotta go to the bathroom. And so I went to the bathroom trying to process what just happened. And after that, I went to the living room, was on Facebook, and he messaged me. And here's the messages that he messaged me. And at this time, I was a new believer. It was my first year of being a Christian, so I didn't have enough knowledge like I just presented to you about the image of God and what sin is and how does that impact our decisions. And this is real life stuff. So he messaged me, already assuming what he did, already knowing what he did. And I pretty much stated his excuse that he told me before that, you know, he's struggling with mental health, he has double personalities, and so forth. So, not that I knew somewhat that was going to happen tonight, but it happened, obviously. But it's strange that, hey, he already knew what he was doing. And so then it's really scary. Yeah, I bet it is. I bet it was really scary being 2 years older than me to be able to do that. Next, I even stated in my message, hey, I just felt weird. Since I was just aware for this 30 minutes and I just didn't know what to do. I legit told him, hey, this is the weirdest thing. I knew you were trying to do this for 30 minutes. This was back in 2010, you guys. 2010 or 2012, somewhere around there. This is like years ago. And then he's like, honestly, just couldn't even control it. And that's what scares me. Couldn't even control it. The desire that we talked about before. Sin creates desire. And when people don't deal with that sin issue, which we're able to do that through Jesus, to be able to live transformed lives, people state this type of answer, I just couldn't control it. And then I do something dumb. I excuse his action. I say, oh, well, nah, I hate the devil for it, you know. I blame the devil because for sure you couldn't control it. If I was to go back to my teenage years and tell myself, yo, when an action commits sin, they willfully do it. Yeah, the devil can tempt you, but he can't force you to do it. You have the power to choose. But no, I excused his behavior because I was young and was new in the faith and didn't have a logical response to this. And then he goes on saying, yeah, I'm gonna go take a shower. And I'm like, all right. And after that, I went ahead and looked for people that I trusted. I went to one of my best friends and told her the scenario, and we cried it out, hugged it. But at this age, I was not aware of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and all this other stuff at that age. And so, I have evidence, I have proof, so I can relate to you guys who have struggled or have friends that struggle, because it's not fun. Let's talk about the outcome. Here's certain things I noticed in my life. The good thing is God has healed me to this, which is why I'm able to speak my story. A lot of people right now are still scared to share their story, whether because it's out of fear, whether because they're still going through the healing process, and heal. But definitely, this month is to spread awareness. So emotionally, I had a scenario where I was confused about my sexual identity. There's a period of time where I struggled with that when I was in my childhood, and it wasn't until I recognized, science and our biblical account, this is the way to go. That's just my philosophy and what the biblical account stated to me. Not only that, but I had false guilt. I was like, man, I just don't know why I feel so guilty or why this happened to me. As a child, I just didn't understand it. Why did this have to happen to me? And then I had shame. when it comes to something dirty like that, yeah, you feel down. You feel like you lost your worth because you've been manipulated. You've been taken advantage of. And it doesn't feel good to be able to go through that. Two social things that happened to me because I was looking at the symptoms of people going through this stuff and what are certain triggers that they have. One of them is the deep fear of saying no. And this is true for my case. I'm always a yes man. I'm going to do everything, for the sake of just pleasing people. And because it was hard for me to say no, I was scared they're going to react or they're going to do something, And those are just the triggering points where I just rather not say anything. When it comes to arguments, when it comes to those kind of things, because I'm just shocked. I'm just in shock. And that's what happened in high school. I was in shock. It's like, yo, what is going on here? He keeps being persistent. Lastly, I was defensive by reaction of touch. Now, these two were male figures. And so there's a moment in my timeline, in my healing process, where it was hard for somebody to hug me, a male to hug me, or one of my youth pastors to put a hand around my shoulder. It was hard for me to take that. I would take his hand out of the way. I would not do hugs. It would feel awkward for me to hug people at that time. And it was tough. It was me trying to heal and process, like, hey, there's appropriate touch. It's okay for my best friend to give me a hug. It's okay for somebody to give a hand over my shoulder. But I understand those were triggering moments of my life. And so one thing we need to recognize is if people react like that, there's more that's under what's going on. And we shouldn't automatically judge them right off the bat because they have a story to tell through their scenario. Now the last thing is a call to hope. A call to action, a call to hope. We need to prevent this, you guys. We should not be the people who will tolerate it, who excuse it, even if this person is close to us. The reason why they not let that individual or either report or do anything like that, because he was popular in high school. He was in the choir, he was in the band, he was in the cheerleading squad. I should have done the right thing and did what I did, but I didn't. Which faced me a lot of consequences of not receiving healing right away. So while I'm talking about awareness, be the change. A lot of us believe in God here. Allow Jesus to change your desires. Allow Jesus to change us, because if we don't change our desires, it's going to proceed and grow. And we complain about the world, like, why is there so much evil in the world? It's because people aren't willing to be transformed in the Spirit. And I know this is a deep subject, but we shouldn't be shy about these topics, because these are real life things. So be the voice, be the ones who defend those who can't defend themselves. It's what I talked about last week. We should have each other back. And according to Romans, the law is good. We need to use the law in those scenarios. Yes, forgiveness, cool, but he needs to still do the sentence. He still needs to go through the consequences and the punishment that goes on. This life, every bad decision we have has consequences. And it's us living according to God's standard where we could avoid those consequences. Because God is holy and just, and He knows what's right and what's wrong. While we can shape and distort and validate and do all these different things to make our point of view true. But we're all humans, and we're all fallen, which is why we need Jesus in our lives. So I want all of us to go ahead and close our eyes. We're going to go ahead and pray. There's going to be a prayer for those who are struggling, and prayer for us to have a voice, for us to build courage, to be the change of the world. We're going to have a lot of evils in this world, you guys, and it takes us to be able to take a stand and to defend those who can't defend themselves. So, Father, thank you for this night where we could be real, and I could share my story, which I never shared before. But because it's ugly, Father, I know that my story can provide hope for somebody, whether it's in here or whether it's online. I pray, Father, that you will motivate us to be bold, to prevent those actions from happening, for us to do the diligence to protect our friends against those who are taking advantage, for those who are exploiting people, for those who are being manipulative, Father. I pray also, Father, that if we know anybody who's healing, help us to do what is right and help them through the healing. Help them to seek help, seek counseling, seek somebody that will help them through their struggle. Because I had to go through it, Father, to be able to recognize certain things were okay. And that trauma is real. Trauma takes time. So I pray that you'll heal those who are going through trauma throughout this month. Will we spread awareness through our social medias? And Father, thank you for just having me the boldness to speak the truth. To speak the truth about how you made us. To speak the truth about the condition that we live in. And lastly, the truth about the blessed hope and knowing that God is there to heal, God is there to protect us, and God is there to guide us through it by using people in law, but also using us to be a voice. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, you guys, so like I told